I was watching that whole thing and I was like,
Yes.
this is amazing.
Yes.
I like him for all the wrong reasons. But that's okay. Hey guys, Isabel here. Welcome back to Reeled In. Today is another Dyad discussion with my friend Connor.
So,
And we are going to be discussing Across the Spiderverse, the most amazing sequel to Into the Spiderverse, and honestly, one of the best Spider-Man movies of all time.
yes. Yes.
This discussion will contain spoilers for Across the Spider-Verse, so make sure you go check out that movie and then come back and you can listen to us.
If there's any movie that you're gonna see in the theaters, it's got to be this one. It's amazing, amazing, amazing. Go to your biggest possible screen.
It was so amazing, and as an animation lover, it just made me appreciate the storyline 100% more with all the techniques they used, all the color schemes, plot points, everything. I just loved it.
Me too. I think it's crazy that out of like my top 10 favorite movies, that two of them right now are Spider-Man, and they're both the animated Spider-Man film.
I mean, animation can do so much that honestly, just regular films can't do. And that's why it's one of my favorite mediums.
I know, like the Spider-Verse films, especially this one with the introduction to like the actual Spider-Verse and sort of going into that whole multiverse sort of gimmick that the MCU is also taking, like it's allowed to do a lot of stuff and get away with it in ways that is not only just like fun and cool, but like it matches the story and it's appropriate to the characters, it's respectful to the characters and their stories. There's just like a lot of really cool things to see.
Speaking of the characters, one thing I actually was surprised about, but I love it, is that as much as this is Miles' story, we actually segued a bit into Gwen's story, which I
Yes.
really appreciated. The movie, it starts out with her point of view, and she's kind of giving us this overture of what's going to happen in the movie. And if you pay really close attention, you can see these really big moments, but again, it flashes by really quickly. So again, you kind of have to watch it on slow motion, which is not possible in a theater. But I loved it. I think Gwen was a really interesting character, and we can talk about her progression a little bit later. But I love how her story came full circle. It started with her and ended with her, and I'm very interested to see what she will do in the next movie.
Beyond
Beyond
the Spider-Verse.
the Spider-Verse. Well, I'll talk about Gwen before I talk about Miles and everyone else. I thought I didn't think they were going to do that with her character, with Gwen, kind of being a little bit of an antagonist to Miles, a little bit. I'm kind of wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I feel like pretty well everybody's an antagonist at some point.
Yeah.
Uh, like even, we can get into it later, but even Hobie a little bit, just because he's like so anti-establishment and like anti-system, and I think he's everybody's new favorite. But anyway, yeah, I think most people, it's kind of like Miles against the universe or the multiverse. Yeah, I wasn't expecting Gwen to have such a like an important role just like on her own. So the fact that that whole like prologue was just her, but I love how this film is long enough that it can do that. It can have both, and that you can flesh out both of these characters and have it not be necessarily one or the other story. Like obviously the Spider-Verse I think is more Miles' story, but in this one it is almost equally as much hers. And I like how the film is able to take its time and really develop her because she's very interesting. I think she was a favorite from the first one.
Right. And I think it had to be done to start off with her story so we understand, or hopefully people understand, like why she's doing what she is doing throughout the movie, why she might be a little bit against Miles or working kind of against Miles for Miguel, and why she's just so terrified to go back to her own world, essentially. And speaking with both Gwen and Miles, what I did like a lot is the movie's use of reflection, both physical, because you see Gwen, like Miles is kind of always on her mind, especially after, there is this quick scene where she's trying to fit into this group and she's just like not having a great time. She's still kind of in her own world, and I think Miles is still a part of that. And then when you go over to Miles' side of the story, he's obviously been missing
Enthralled.
Gwen. He's enthralled with her. So we have that physical reflection, but I think throughout the movie, it's also about like internal reflection, kind of figuring out like who you are and what your story is going to be, how you write your own story kind of thing. Miles literally says, I'm going to do it my own way. So, and just kind of, figuring yourself out, which I really appreciate. That's usually a typical like Spider-Man coming of age storyline anyway. But I think the movie handles it handles it very well.
Overall, this movie is a reminder. I remember we were driving back and we both kind of had the same thoughts. It's like, this is why Spider-Man is probably, I would almost say objectively, the best superhero ever. And I think this movie is a big reminder of that.
Right.
Because there's, like you said, there's a lot of self-reflection, but there's a lot of growth. Like Spider-Man, in pretty well every Spider-Man, as far as I'm aware, pretty well every Spider-Man story, he grows in some way.
Mm-hmm. And also while tackling, severe loss, because it's a major point that is made in this movie is to remind us that Spider-Man is not Spider-Man without experiencing some type of tragedy in his life. Unfortunately, like, can they just be happy, please? But it is kind of this canon event that we have been introduced to in Across the Spider-Verse.
I want to see it again. I want to see it again and again and again and again and again. And if I waste all my money going to see this movie and I don't get to pay my bills and see Oppenheimer, that's fine. I'm at peace with that.
I mean, the more you see it, the more Easter eggs you'll be able to discover, honestly. So
I'm buying this one on Blu-ray too.
Yeah.
Because I so far I own all the newer Spider-Mans. I do want to take a moment before we get too deep and just appreciate the cinematography of it. No, but seriously, the art styles. I was watching Into the Spider-Verse, I think, was it like yesterday or the day before? But like I loved the animation styles and the art styles and just like this really like vast playground of different styles, color. Like there's a lot of color in these, which I actually really appreciate. And I feel like they took that and they multiplied it by like a million in this movie, because not only are you getting just like different styles, so like the Vulture from that like Renaissance-esque kind of era
from
from the beginning.
From the Da Vinci
Yeah,
era.
yeah. Like not only is that like super cool having stuff like that, and then like Hobie's style being totally different, but like just zooming out a little bit and just looking at it as it is, it's so beautiful. I remember that shot. I cannot wait for them to release like high-res images of the film, because that shot where Gwen and Miles are under the clock tower and they're just looking over Brooklyn, where it's the two of them sitting what is right side up, to them, and then it has Brooklyn just upside down. And I remember just like saying out, like I had to wipe a tear away from my eye, and I went, "That's so cool!" And I said it like really loudly. But like, even I guess like smaller stuff like that is so powerful about the Spider-Verse movies so far. And I know a lot of other studios are kind of looking at this and be like, we can do that too. Like we can branch out, we can do things a little bit differently. So I love the bravery that these films have with the animation style.
I personally, as an animation lover, just love seeing how much improvement has happened. I think it's been 4 years since the first Spider-Verse movie.
5.
Oh wow. But like
5, yeah.
that one was already like a pioneer like animation movie in its time, and then just seeing how the animation still improves all the time. And I watch a lot of animation, so I see it everywhere, and it makes me so happy personally. And then you can use colors to also enhance your own story. So again, in Gwen's universe, in an interview, Haley Steinfeld said that you can think of Gwen's universe kind of as like a mood ring. It focuses more on like pastel colors, which I think is interesting, but again, it matches, her aesthetic, her suit. And so, when she's kind of depressed at the beginning of the movie, everything's blue. Her hair looks a little green because, it's not that, bright blonde it usually is. But then when she has this nice warm moment with her father, herself and just that her surrounding aura turns pink. And I think that was really cool. And then when she's kind of having like a mental meltdown, you can see like this drips going on in the paint of the background. And I was watching that whole thing and I was like,
Yes.
This is amazing.
Yes. I know there were a couple other times where like I got like watery eyed. I'm like, I didn't want to be the only person just like bawling my eyes out at art styles. But I can't wait to own it so that I can just do that all the time.
All right. Should we talk about Miles? I feel like this is his movie. We haven't talked about him yet.
That's true. So now we can dive a little bit deeper, I guess, now that I've got all my animation yayas out.
I think Miles honestly starts off as that typical like Spider-Man journey. He's literally, as I said earlier, trying to figure himself out how to navigate being Miles Morales and then also being, Brooklyn's Spider-Man. I feel like you might have more insight onto him because like he felt like a typical Spider-Man to me, to be totally honest.
I mean, he does, but I'm glad that we started off with Gwen and then we jumped over to Miles, because once we jumped over to Miles, like that really sort of putting those two pieces together really sets the tone of the film, for the rest of it. And so with Miles, you have that whole him, like you said, him juggling to be Spider-Man, um, now being in the public eye, right? So he
Right.
has all of that to deal with. He's got stuff going on with his parents. He's got stuff going on in his personal life. Even though he's a sophomore in high school, he's trying to get a jump on a college. We all know how that is, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we
And
do.
and the fact that he's like super duper smart, and his parents have this expectation for him, and they're trying to get him into colleges, and there's that whole scene with the college counselor where she's like, what's your story? And then he starts kind of just like talking about it, eventually starts to open up a little bit, and she goes, yes, and it's gonna be like this. So really sets off, I think, the fact that everybody else is trying to write his story for him, but
That's true.
he's really just is struggling to take the time to do that for himself because he has all these other things going on.
Yeah, I think that also applies to when he's masked as Spider-Man, but he's talking to his dad and kind of giving his dad advice on himself without his dad knowing that. It's just, he just wants the room to spread his wings, basically. But I think it's really important sometimes with parents, they want the best for their children, and deep down they are just trying to help, but it can get very overwhelming
They tend to
sometimes.
project themselves onto their children.
Right. And I know I can't really personally speak on this too much, but just based on some of my friends, what they've told me, that it's a little bit more difficult when your parents are maybe like first generation. I guess in this case, he's because he's in Brooklyn, American, that they tend to push that whole, like, you need to be great, you need to go to a good college, get good grades. They tend to push that a lot harder, is what I've gathered based on my friends' stories. So I'm happy that they kind of showed that, because I feel like there's a lot of people who can relate and understand that.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot of people are saying that they've really amped it up with his Latino heritage, which a lot of people are appreciating. Not only having that, is really good for representation from a character standpoint, it does sort of open up more possibilities, which we got between him and Rio with his mom. Like there are a lot of really, really emotional moments between him and Rio. And like I listened to the score, there's one called Rio and Miles, and it's very reminiscent of the themes from the first one where Jeff shows up to his door and he's all like tied up in his chair, and he just like gives him the speech and he says like there's a spark in you and you just got to take a leap of faith. And it's sort of having those moments with his parents, because in almost every other Spider-Man story, his parents are gone. His parents are dead. And the closest thing he has is Uncle Ben until he doesn't. The closest thing he has is Aunt May, which, there's like a million different ways that could go. But sometimes that can get underdeveloped. So the fact that you're able to have a Spider-Man, you're able to have a Spider-Person who can have these very emotional moments with their parents, but they're not like fighting moments. Like even with Gwen, having that relationship between her and her father is so important to her arc, but then just to the breaking of that whole canon sort of traditional story. I see a lot of cosplayers. A lot of people started their cosplays, and it's not just Miles, it's not just Gwen, it's not just Jessica Drew. Like they're really starting to like take screenshots from like other characters, and they're really like putting their whole foot into it, and it's like go for it. This is why this sort of representation of this diversity in the Spider-Verse, I think,
that's why it matters.
Yeah.
Speaking of Spider people, should we talk about our favorite Dorito man, Miguel?
Miguel O'Hara.
Miguel O'Hara, shaped like an actual Dorito, back muscles for days, a thick booty. It's juicy. I did not expect that. It took me out of the movie a bit because I was just so shocked on how big his booty was.
Oh my God.
I like him for all the wrong reasons, but that's okay.
I don't like him, but for the right reasons. So
I don't agree with
at
him.
least one of us is reading it the way it's supposed to be read.
I don't agree with him, but he's just nice to look at sometimes. Anyway, Miguel, my man, Miguel. First of all, already, for me at least, a very interesting character. His suit design is so awesome. Like I might actually try to recreate it, like kind of soon. Like I just loved it. But also, and I'm not just going to start off saying I'm not a comic reader. So I just know very baseline information from what my friends who are comic readers have told me. But Miguel is different from the rest of the spider people, that he is genetically half spider. That's why he has the fangs. That's why he has the claws.
Like it reminds me of a wolf spider. And I'm arachnophobic, so like actual spiders, I don't know a whole lot, but I don't think I gotta try too hard, not to think about this too hard so I don't trigger myself. Um, I don't think that like that subspecies of spider shoots webs like tarantulas and stuff. Like, I don't think so. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's sort of what it reminds me of just from like context.
I
But
do
obviously,
not know
I'm
it.
not gonna research that. So I would appreciate if somebody else did, and they only used words. No photos, please. This is the first time I'm asking for no photos.
Yeah, I only know it maybe
Just
like
words.
I only know what like two spiders look like in real life. I don't know, like you said wolf spider. I was like, I don't even know what that looks like. So
They're quite okay.
we're not gonna get into
Anyway, I've triggered myself. Cool. Great.
but yes, he's very interesting. And the reason why he's in this dark room is not just to be brooding, but because light, like his all his other senses are so heightened that like physical light actually bothers him. And there's so many details about him, and again in the whole movie, but I focused a lot on him, obviously. Oh, he doesn't have a spider sense either,
Oh, I didn't catch that.
which I think is interesting. That's why everything else, all his other senses are heightened.
So I wonder if because he doesn't have a spider sense is why he's like so on edge all the time because he doesn't have that spidey intuition that most of them seem to have.
That could be a possibility. I think his life is also just incredibly tragic. And we saw a little bit of it in this movie. I'm hoping to get a lot more of it in the next movie because I know there is a lot more to it. Because he is a geneticist. He made a device that could splice genes like into something else. So he's like a gene splicer essentially. And that's how he became his version of Spider-Man. He spliced himself with the DNA of a spider. Don't know why you would do that, but that's what you did. Miguel's kind of confusing. Again, because I'm not a comic reader, so I don't have the full story like in detail. But
there's also a lot in the context of this spider thing, this spider medium that we don't know just yet.
That's true, yeah. But there was a scene of him like injecting himself with something, and that could be like the spider DNA. Because I think in order to like make himself happy, he might have taken this, like he might have tried to splice the spider DNA back out of himself in that new universe. But I don't know. Again, I hope we get the revelation for that in the next movie. I don't know why we wouldn't, but I hope we do.
Yeah, there's a lot that's confusing. So the canon event and sort of this universe's version of like the multiverse is still equally as confusing. Just calling it the canon event is just like super meta. Which I appreciate actually like a lot.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I was like, canon, okay.
And again, I think that's how these movies are able to get away with that.
Mm-hmm.
Being animation and like not having to take itself too seriously, but like it's still very confusing.
Right. And I think that might also get explained a bit more in Beyond, because again, in the comics, Miguel O'Hara is not like the Watcher or whatever over of the Spider-Verse. That's actually Madam Web. And I don't believe we saw her like in like an Easter egg. Like I don't think she was in that like what did Gwen call it? Like the lobby area or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't think she was in there. Again, I could have easily missed it. There's so many. There's 280 spider peoples. So just walking around in there. So if she comes into the Beyond the Spider-Verse, I feel like she could explain some stuff that's happening.
Yeah. I think there's definitely a reason why she's not there, like in terms of like the movie's context. Because I know Chris Miller and Phil Lord have said that like they deliberately chose to put Miguel in this position for this movie for a couple of reasons. And I'm just wondering, yeah, I'm wondering a lot.
I'm wondering if these canon events that Miguel thinks are destabilizing the universes is not actually what's happening.
So more like it's like a rewriting as opposed to a destabilization.
Not necessarily, because first of all, in this movie, we are privy to two canon events that do not like events that happen that are not supposed to happen in this movie. So for example, it's hinted at that like Peter B. Parker was never supposed to marry MJ and have a child. Like that was not his canon event was kind of be like, by himself. But he had it again, thanks to Miles, as that there's a very long scene explaining this. His world obviously has not destabilized. And the fact that Miguel goes through so much effort to explain that there's always a captain, like a police captain that dies which confused me because I always thought it was Uncle Ben, not just like a random like police captain. But again, there's so many Spider
I think it's both.
versions. You think it's both?
I think it's both.
True. Okay. Well,
Or
anyway.
like a version of Uncle Ben, or the sibling of his parents.
Hmm.
Because for our MCU, Tom Holland Spider-Man, it's Aunt May.
Right. So there's always going to be like a police captain very close to one of these spider people that dies. However, again, going back to Gwen, in her speech, her father, who was a police captain, quits like being a police captain right then and there. So that, that canon event that may have happened in the future is not going to happen anymore. Her universe is still fine. So I think whatever is causing these destabilizations is not necessarily due to these canon events, but possibly someone or something that's in the background. I don't think it's Spot because that'd be really convenient, but something in the background is still at play here. And I really need to like rewatch like at half speed because I feel like we've had hints to it, but they're very, very subtle. So I'm not really sure what it is exactly, but that's my theory.
I gotta watch it like 10 more times just to enjoy it, and then 10 more times after that to look for all these different hints. Because I was watching the first one, like there's so many consistencies, and whether they were intended consistency at the time or if it was like a retrospective thing, like, oh, we did this, like let's make this important in the next one, or let's connect this in the next one. So like the number 42, other than I saw that somebody pointed out that 42 was also Jackie Robinson's number, and he played for Brooklyn.
And he broke the color barrier for baseball.
Yeah. And you sort of have, in this film's context, you sort of have Miles doing that. So there's connections there. And then there's Earth 42, which was where the spider that bit him came from. It was supposed to bite Miles in that universe. Like he was supposed to be that universe's Spider-Man.
Do you think because in the first film, when Miles is first bitten, the colors changed from Prowler to Spider-Man? If Universe 42 Miles was supposed to be Spider-Man, do you think our Miles was supposed to become the Prowler? And like now their roles are reversed?
It's possible. So that's the thing that's
confusing. There's so many strings.
It's like a web.
It's like a web.
That's what's confusing, because I think having that introduces the possibility that is what could have happened, but you never know, because like I don't know, because I also don't feel like, even as close as he was to Aaron, I feel like this, or like our Miles morally and emotionally is different than 42's Miles, but I also don't know enough about 42 Miles just yet.
Yeah, I feel like he's been through a lot.
I just know that he's voiced by somebody else. He's voiced by Jarrell Jerome, but which is why you also get like a different, like a little bit deeper of a tone, because he's got a much deeper voice than Shamik Moore.
But continuing on things that doesn't really make sense, still back to Miguel and his like utilitarianism, and that not one single spider person who, no matter what spider person you are, you're smart. Like that's always been a characteristic. No one questioned him at all. And how that leads to like the danger of blindly following a leader.
Like leadership.
Yeah. Which was not something I thought was going to be portrayed in this.
Yeah, that was the one thing that was like the most out of pocket spider person trait. Yeah. Because like, so excluding Venom, sort of introducing the idea of a Spider-Man not pulling his punches with Andrew Garfield in No Way Home sort of shows that Spider-Man is capable of sort of taking this dark path.
Right.
But generally, his thing is, do the right thing. I want to try to excuse it because I feel a lot of the Spider-Man chase, like those people weren't in the room when Miguel went on his soapbox and talked about how Miles is an anomaly. He wasn't supposed to be there. And if he does this, then his entire universe is going to collapse. So I think it's more just like, yeah, blindly following orders, but like not knowing the context. So I want to try to excuse most of those spider people, just like having them assume that he did something like really, really bad. Because younger Spider-Men in their journey tend to have this sort of just general thought of doing this is bad and wrong. And again, I'm just going to compare the one that I relate to the most, which would just be Tom Holland's Spider-Man. So going back to Homecoming, not understanding where Vulture is coming from. I understand that selling weapons to bad guys is wrong, but he never asks like why. Why is he doing that? So I think you just have to, I guess, assume that they haven't quite taken that time and that journey yet.
Yeah, that is a characteristic, just especially if there's someone who they perceive as like, I guess, more morally
Wrong.
correct. Well, that's more like someone who like a mentor. I don't know, maybe these other 280 spider people look up to Miguel that way. So I'm still trying to wrap my brain around though, like the characters who play a main role in the story. So like Jessica Drew, Peter B. Parker, and Gwen. Gwen I can excuse because I feel like people are mad at her. I understand. I was kind of disappointed in her too, but I think people also tend to forget she's 16 years old.
Yeah.
And again, going back to her motivation is she's terrified to go back to her home universe. She's terrified Miguel's going to send her back there if she doesn't do her job. Understandably so. Her father literally pointed a gun at her head. I think that would freak out most people. I think that would mess most people up. But Jessica Drew and Peter B. Parker, if I had to choose someone to be like mad at for kind of following along and kind of going against Miles, it would probably be Peter B. Parker because he's an adult. He's a grown man. Jessica Drew also, she seems like a really smart lady. Like I feel like there's something else that Miguel had to have told them for them to blindly like kind of follow him like that. Especially for Peter B. Parker, like Miles is your friend. Hello.
Your mentor.
Yeah.
The son before you had a daughter. He does like learn though.
That's true.
You know,
yeah.
so you see him in the new band going to get him. I don't understand Jessica Drew yet. That's not what I was expecting out of her character.
Yeah, me too.
I was like, why? Why? But I'm sure there's kind of a reason for it. And I hope that we get more of her and more of Miguel and more this like other side, because there's a lot of that we don't understand.
Right. I'm sure we will get a lot more. But again, Miguel is simply an antagonist. He's not necessarily the villain.
He's not the villain, but he's the antagonist for sure.
Yeah, but the villain who is Spot, who I honestly was not expecting this either. The trailer had him being really goofy, just like a weak villain or whatever. And I was happy with that because I was ready to love Spot. And I think it's kind of interesting because usually for these superhero movies, we've seen the progression of their villains going from like one-dimensional to two-dimensional, and now they're pretty decent. They're pretty like three-dimensional villains with great plot lines and great story backgrounds and everything like that. But then you have Spot, and literally at one point, Spot is just like, you know what? I'm gonna be a villain simply to be a villain, and he goes so hardcore.
Yeah,
like that's kind of it. But I like it. It leaves room for the actual issue of, again, Miguel and his whole thought process and what's going on with Miles physically, and again that cliffhanger at the end. But Spot just being like his new mission in life is to be the like best villain, or like the worst best villain ever or whatever. I'm like, bro, can we please chill? Like, can we please just like take it down a notch?
he kind of reminds me a little bit of, he reminds me of Syndrome a little bit. Not like a hero turned villain, but more just like you're not taking me seriously, so I'm going to take this way too far and fuck your life up. And
I'm kind of terrified of him now.
And like having him voiced as Jason Schwartzman too. It's just like I need more of him too.
I know. Technically, he's already given us the trailer to Beyond the Spider-Verse. If you were paying really close attention when his and Miles' conscious like merged briefly, and Miles sees all these like flashes. That's the trailer. We've got it a year early.
Yeah, that's your post credit is the during the credit.
I was ready to love him, and now I'm scared of him. So, but I will be interested to see. I feel like he will play, if my theory is correct, and there is something else like in the shadows. I feel like Spot may actually kind of bring light to that in his darkness or whatever. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I'm excited for him and see what happens about that. First of all, the whole like last 20 minutes of the movie, I was actually quite unsure on where we were going to stop, because the music kept increasing in its intensity, and then you had these scenes that would be great cliffhanging scenes, but then they just kept going and going and going, and finally we realized that Miles went to a different universe.
He went to Earth 42.
He went to Earth 42, the original spider that bit him, that universe where Spider-Man never existed. And he meets his uncle Aaron again, who, if also you pay attention in this second movie, there's a lot of nods to him, especially in like Miles's room, which I thought was really sweet, but also enhances, that Uncle Aaron is still important to both Miles and the story. So we see Uncle Aaron again, and then we get a older version, a more, I guess, rugged version of Miles as the Prowler.
I don't know if they're a different age, but definitely.
I think he definitely was a little older because he was taller and everything too.
Oh, true, true.
But oh my, that I did not expect that. I didn't expect it until like he started talking like behind the mask, and then I was like, I bet it's him, and it was.
Yeah, because it's like, where is Miles in this universe? Like, clear, obviously he exists.
Yeah, I was like, you're in this other Miles's bedroom in his house. Like, where is the other Miles?
With your braids out.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a couple things I did catch and a couple things I did not catch. I did catch that something was wrong, but I didn't catch what was wrong until like when the movie was almost over.
Well, you caught on that he was in the wrong universe, I think, before I did, because it didn't hit me until there was like that pause when he says, I am Spider-Man. And there's just like that silence, like that uncomfortable silence. And she goes, who's Spider-Man? What's that? And I'm just like, oh no. Oh no, he's not in the right universe. Like that's when it hit me.
Our
But
first clue should have been the color scheme, though,
I know.
because he left a purple Brooklyn and
Because I
came
was
back
also
to a green one.
yeah, well, because I was also confused because Gwen was at the other universe, but so was Jeff and Jessica and the other. So
Scarlet Spider.
I'm like, wait. So if Gwen is in this window, how come we don't see her? I'm sure it's just like a glare. But then Jeff walks inside, like he walks up the steps. I'm like, where's Dad? Where's Dad? What? I think we would see Dad. Like, is Dad gonna walk in the door and also be there, and he's gonna end up confessing to both of them like accidentally at the same time? And then he walks upstairs, and then it cuts to the other one, and who's Spider-Man? And then it cuts back, and where's Miles? Where's Miles? And I'm like, oh no. Oh no. Oh
I love
god.
when
Oh
movies
no.
do that, though. The diversion of attention. I do love when they do that. Yeah, and then that is another like I think unrealistic reaction with Gwen and Miles's parents. For me personally, I just felt it was a little unreal. Like if you got lost somewhere and I had to tell your mother that I didn't know where you were, I would not be acting as nonchalant as Gwen was. She's like, yeah, I don't know, but I'll tell you if I find him. Like, girl, what?
I feel like his parents are a lot more chill than ours. So that could be where that's coming from. I want to try to sort of excuse it and think that like I think they already know something's up. I don't think they know exactly what's up, but they know that something is up.
I don't know. I just feel like if you're told that you don't know where like your child is missing, I feel like there should be a little bit more of like a, oh my God, what? And just like a little bit more freak out. But anyway, it's not that big of a deal for me. It's just something that I thought was a little bit like unrealistic. But yeah, honestly, I'm excited for Uncle Aaron to return with another major role in Beyond the Spider-Verse.
And beyond the Spider-Verse, potentially. Potentially. Can we just talk about the Childish Gambino in the room, please? Just
Yeah,
like real quickly.
the Donald Glover in the in the Prowler suit.
Because that was the biggest reaction I think anybody had.
I was so shocked. I was so
I was
shocked.
like this. I was like this for a while, and it just makes me very excited. And I know there's rumors of a live action Miles Morales movie in the works with Sony and MCU, but Sony and Marvel, but like we're just like that much closer. And then having, because he had been an advocate to be Spider-Man for the longest time, having him as the Prowler, just having him in the universe other than just sort of showing up as Aaron Davis in Homecoming,
Right.
taking it a step and a half further. It's just like really, really cool.
Yeah. Well, he
Oh,
inspired Miles Morales back in the
yeah,
day. He was the first voice actor of the animated Miles Morales.
yeah.
So
And
it's
like
awesome.
that's really cool. And like I follow a lot of people, and like I said, I'm like chronically online, and I've seen people reacting to this in ways that are like far more ecstatic than me. And again, like this is why these things are really important to have. I just love it. I just love it. I love the Spider-Verse. I love the Spider-Verse so much.
It is an amazing film, and we have to wait a year.
Only a year.
Only a
Only a
year.
year, because this was supposed to come out 2020, and then it got pushed to 2022 because of COVID, and then it got pushed again because some things weren't quite right with the story of the animation.
I'll
It
wait
paid
as
off.
long as it takes for a nearly perfect film. So
Like, I know I'd wait another 2 years if that means that they can top this by like 1 billion.
well, those are all my points. I don't know if we could talk about this all day long, but
I
it's already
could.
been it's already
I
been
could.
2 hours.
Oh
So
my god. Oh my god. Oh my
so
god. Oh my god.
do you have any final points to add?
I don't think so.
Well, guys, that has been our Dyad discussion on Across the Spider-Verse. Leave a like on the video, comment what was your favorite Easter egg, favorite moment, favorite scene from the movie, and what you think about the movie overall. Let us know. Love to hear it. And be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future Marvel movie reviews, Marvel reaction videos, and Marvel discussion videos. But guys, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.